Welcome back to the Guts video tutorials. Um, in the last video we added this floor and the treasure chest and did some basic manipulation of the objects in the workspace. Now in this video we're going to take a look at the toolbar and how we can use the toolbar now that we have something in our workspace window. First of all, I want to go ahead and add another treasure chest, so I'm going to open up my layout link palette again, and I'm going to select the same chest and add it to the workspace. Okay. Now in the last video I showed you how to move things around using your arrow keys. I'm going to show you that you can also use these arrows. Now, if you're familiar with 3D programs, then you're familiar with how these arrows work. One thing that may seem confusing is they're there, you see them, but you can't move. The reason for that is because they're not selectable until you actually select the toolbar button up here. Edit position. So once you select that, you'll see when you hover over the arrows, they're selectable, as well as these squares. And you can, once selected, you can move the object with these arrows in the direction and the opposite direction as well. So this arrow will move it to the right, as well as the left, and the same thing with the other arrows. Selecting this green box allows me to move it in all directions, with the exception of up and down. But I can do that using either this blue box or this red box. Okay. So, that's how we use the arrows and the edit position button on the toolbar. There's also this rotate button, edit orientation. Now this is, as before, the same as the keyboard shortcut when you press Control and use your arrow keys to rotate, except instead of your arrow keys you have these little quarter circles. So if you select this green quarter circle and turn it, you're going to see it rotate. And then, as with the edit position button, you have these other two quarter circles that you can use to rotate it along a different axis. So, as you can see, you can kind of turn it on its side and whatnot. Now, this box here, this drop-down box, is for rotation. I'm not sure what the difference between world and local rotation is, unfortunately, but I do know that it has to do with the rotation. So, when I figure that out, I'll let you guys know. Also, you have these three boxes here, and these have to do with how this object is going to be manipulated. While we're still in rotate, if I look at the snap angle box here, I have different angles. I have 1 degree, 5 degrees, 10, 45, 90, and 180. This is going to tell the program when I rotate it this many degrees. So it was set to 90, and if you noticed, when you rotate it, it's moving 90. Now if I set that to 45, you're going to see that I can now go, each turn is going to be 45 degrees. If I go all the way down to 1, I get almost complete control of where it is. well, yeah, complete control. uh, let's set that back to 45, and if we go into edit position, you'll see that we also have these snap values for X, Y, and Z. When I'm moving this chest, you'll see I have to drag it kind of far to get it to move. Now that's because it's moving at a snap of a value of 5. Now if I set that to 1, I get a lot more movement out of this. I can even set it to 0.01, which is pretty much complete control of where it is. You're going to be using these depending on what you're trying to do. In a lot of cases, you're probably going to be using larger snap sizes so that things end up symmetrical and orderly. But there's going to be objects that you want to, place perfectly in a position that isn't symmetrical. I guess with the symmetry, you're going to be using that for things like walls and floors and stuff, and actually that's forced because the objects like walls and floors, if I select this floor piece, you'll see the snap size is only 4. You can only set it to 4. You got a little bit, you have some more options in your Y value for the floor piece. But you're going to be stuck with, some things are going to be stuck with only 1 snap value. Okay. Now, another thing I wanted to show you about the rotate and the moving is if you control click 2 objects, you'll see both of these, you'll see the mover here has relocated to the middle of these 2 objects, and over here in the layout window you see both of them are selected. Now if I go to move, it's going to move both of these objects as if they were a group, which is very handy. I can also use my arrow keys, and I can rotate this group as well using either the arrows or my arrow keys on my keyboard. Okay. This button here is for scale, and again, you can do this individually or as a group. So if I press the up button, you'll see it's scaling up, looking real crazy. And you can scale it in any direction. Now if you hold down the shift key, this is useful. If you hold down the shift key and you do the scale, it's going to keep the ratio of the object the same, so it won't get distorted. So that's useful. Now with the other buttons here, the direction, if you're gonna hold down the shift key when you're using these arrows, it's actually going to clone the same way that if you hold the shift and press an arrow key on your keyboard. So if I hold the shift and then pull the arrow key, see it's going to clone that object. Okay. Now we have our editor brush, which is a very useful feature in Guts. We have our editor brush, our brush eraser, and then this little button here that hides our controllers, which is basically just our arrows there that we saw right there. Took a look at our snap values, and here's a button for turning snap on and off. Okay, and we're going to take a look at the brush in a second, but first we have this button here for toggle player light, and if you press that, you'll see that it simulates what it looks like for the player in the game. So in the game, it's not lit up, there's shadows, and as the player moves closer, it lights up the area. And if I turn my pane back on, You can see that that player light is centered on the pane. So go ahead and turn that back off. This group of buttons here, this little blue box, is a reload menu, and you can reload everything in the layout, or you can just reload specific things in the layout, and we'll be using that later. Collision type, this is something, again, we'll be using later, but this has to do with how, once in the game, this has to do with how things interact with each other when they touch or collide. And then we have our camera speed, which you can set to half, 1, 2, 4. And this is going to change when you're moving around in your workspace how fast it moves. So if I set it to 4, you'll see a major difference. So you can see it moves a lot faster. Set it back to 1. Here's another useful thing. If you hold down the control key while moving around in the workspace, it's going to speed your camera up as well. So you don't have to constantly switch back and forth between your camera speeds. So here's your regular movement, and then holding down control, you get your speedy movement. Now this is going to be useful in large layouts, so that, you know, if you have a section of your dungeon way over there that you want to get to, it's not going to take you 10 years to get there. Okay, and then we have this drop down here. As far as I can tell, this is for the brush. It selects what your brush is going to paint. And then finally, the last object, or the last thing on the toolbar, is this little clock here. And as far as I can tell, I haven't really seen it in action yet, but as far as I can tell, this is a representation of in-game time. So you can see if you left click it, it opens up this menu, and gives you the current time, the multiplier, and you can slide the time so that you can set it to a different time. And like I said, I'm assuming this is just to represent in-game time so that you can see what your layout would look like in the daytime or the nighttime, etc. And right before we go into the brush, I just also want to point out these buttons over here. We talked about the game mode button, which puts you into a test mode. And then you have your undo and your redo. And these, again, are pretty self-evident if you've used software before. They just allow you to undo your last step or redo it. So now the brush. And I haven't used this a whole bunch yet, but I know that I'm going to. If you click it, it's going to open up this window. And I believe that this is just a way to make custom brushes or edit the properties of the brush. I haven't messed around with it yet. You don't have to. We'll look at it later. But if you select your brush tool and come over here, there's all this stuff. And if you select something, say let's do plant fern. So I selected a fern. Now if I come back into my workspace, and you'll see I have this little blue circle on my mouse now. If I come back in my workspace and left click, I can just paint these ferns into the game. This is incredibly useful. So let's change it to some lilies. And see, now we're painting some lilies in here. This is going to be great later on when we're making some actual dungeons, and especially if you're doing an outdoor area. Okay, so that's the brush, and then you can take a look here. If you hit the eraser button, this is for the brush. It opens the same kind of window. the brush editor, and you have your circle down here again, and you can erase the objects. And what's really cool about this is it's not just going to erase any brush object, it's only going to erase the thing that you have selected. So if you have multiple layers of foliage or what have you, and you just want to get rid of the lilies, you can select the lilies and erase them. So that is incredibly useful. Now, that's about it for this video. We can hop in here and check out this little area that we made with our new toolbar features. And at the same time, I will show you a new way to start up the game test mode. If you hold down the control button and right click, you'll get this little menu here, and you can either select start here or close. Close is just going to close the menu. Start here is going to start the game test mode up, but it's going to place your character exactly where you right clicked. And this is incredibly useful, especially when you start having a larger dungeon, because every time you hit this play button, it's going to start you at the same spot. But say if you wanted to go all the way over here and start your character halfway through the dungeon, what you would do is you would go to that spot, you'd control right click and select start here, and it would start your game up with your character right in that position. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.